Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm releasing this little real-time demo today as a way to thank all of you who have subscribed to me here on YouTube. I've just crossed over 40,000 subscribers on YouTube, numbers that I never thought possible, and that's all with your help. So this is my way of saying thank you. And it's also a nice way for me to take a break from a bigger painting that I'm working on. So I've got this very large kitty on my easel this week. And I thought that today I would take a little break from this bigger painting and work on a smaller project just for you guys here on YouTube. So I hope that you enjoy this. If you haven't already, then please do join the 40,000 other subscribers and hit that subscribe button here on YouTube. Also, do check out my Patreon channel if you like my paintings, if you like my teaching style. I've got lots more over on my Patreon channel for you to explore as well. But let's show you what I'm going to paint today. And as I said, I'm going to take a break from one big kitty and I'm going to put this little teeny weeny kitten on my easel instead. So it's a lot smaller. I'm hoping to not go into a huge amount of detail, rather just try to capture this little ball of fluff as best I can. And I hope that many of you might work along with me too. So let's get this set up on the easel now, and I'll share the materials with you that you'll need to work along with me. So as you can see, this is quite a small little painting. I'm hoping that I can do this in just one sitting. So one afternoon, if you're working along with me, hopefully it will be a nice way to spend an afternoon. And I'm working on pastel matte paper. This is a light yellow colour of pastel matte paper, and I've cut it to 8 inches square. Also bear in mind that I've left a little border where I've taped it on, so the actual painting is probably around 7 inches squared. And I was making use of my Unison animal pastel set for my lioness painting, and I've decided to just keep that palette on my easel for handiness. And I'm going to use all of the colours from my Unison animal set. Now I won't even need all of those colours, but if you have this set, you'll be able to work along with me with those exact same colours. For all of the materials that I'm using though, you'll find some links in my description below for where you can purchase them. So here on screen now, I'll share the exact colours that go into making this little painting. So I'll add this on later on so that you can see exactly what colours I'm going to use. And if you don't have the animal set from Unison, you can always substitute for what colours you do have. So hopefully this colour list here will give you an idea of the type of colour palette that I'm going to use. And I'll just mention before I make a start on this that I have already got lots of real-time tutorials here on my YouTube as well. I have lots of time lapses, lots of informational videos all about how to use soft pastel, and then also some real-time demos just like this one. So lots here on YouTube for you to explore. And then, as I mentioned at the start, I've also got a Patreon channel where for a very small subscription each month you get access to my entire catalogue, and there are dozens and dozens of tutorials on all sorts of different subject matters. But I hope that wherever you are in the world that you'll enjoy either watching or working along with me on this little fur ball of a kitten today. So let's make a start. So here I've got my line sketch transferred onto the pastel matte paper and I'm ready to paint. I have got another video here on YouTube that shows you how I get to this stage. So hopefully you can be at this stage along with me and we start the painting process together. Now I did consider making the background in this plain. You can see in the photo reference that the little kitten is coming through one of those little scratchers that you can buy for cats, one of these little tunnels. And I thought it was so sweet, and I really like how the light and shade, we get really dark shadows in around here. And I love this little paw coming out over the front edge of it, so I decided to include it. I'm going to try and keep it simple though, and I'm going to make a change in the photo reference. I'm going to make this area in the background completely black and dark so that we get the little kitten just looming out of the darkness. I think that will work quite nicely. So let's make a start, and the first thing that I'm going to do is a bit of blocking in with the black, and especially in the background first, because ideally I want to get all of the colours blocked in around the edges of the kitten before I start any work on the kitten. So I'm picking up a harder black stick. So this isn't one of my soft pastel sticks. This is a black new pastel. But any black harder stick will do the same job. And I like to use a harder stick for my black, especially in the first layers, because it doesn't go all over the place. It's because it's less soft, you don't get a lot of excess dust blowing all over the place. So for my darkest black values, I usually use this darker, harder pastel stick. And that's really the only time that I'll pick up a harder stick. Most of the rest of the work will be done with my Unison pastels and a little bit of pastel pencil here and there as well for extra details, as you saw from the materials list at the start. So the first thing I'm doing is just looking for all of the darkest bits of shadow. And it's quite dark inside the little tunnel. That's why I wanted to include the tunnel, because the back of the cat here, down this back edge of the cat, and the tail here, they're all pretty dark because they're inside the tunnel. And then we've got the main light source coming from the left, heading down the left side of the cat where it really peeps out of the tunnel. So to take the tunnel completely out of the equation, you're left with some lighting effects to explain, really. That's why I often like to include the background, because the lighting on the main subject is often how it is because of the surroundings. So sometimes you strip away all of the surroundings and it's not quite as effective. Sometimes you miss what's causing that light and shade on the main subject. So although I wanted to keep this a very short little tutorial, I couldn't resist including this background. So as I said, I'm gonna make the hole in the tunnel dark. So I'm just colouring that in really quite solidly with my black pastel. And then we've also got a lot of shadow up around the top of the tunnel here as well. All of that's going to really help the little kitten to jump out from this background. I was so close to adding a light neutral coloured background on this, but I just love the light and shade. I really like how the darker shadows in around the kitten really will help to enhance the vibrant colours on the kitten. Those lighter brown earths and orange tones. And then also we've got some lovely blue violet tones running through the tunnel itself. And I'm hoping that all of that is quite complementary to the little kitten. That, and I'm just addicted to painting backgrounds, really. I really love adding a background in my work. As you will already know if you've watched any of my videos. So when you're thinking about the light and shade, you're really looking at what direction the light's coming from, and then you're trying to see all the places that that has an effect. So for example, we've got more shadow on this side of the paw than on this side of the paw because the light is coming from that side. So everything is connected. The same light falls on everything in the picture. So it seems drastic to colour in this much with the black to begin with, but I really just want to quickly darken down the background. And you can see when I blend this now with my fingertip, you really do get a good solid black. Where I've leaned a little bit heavier with the pastel, it really does turn into quite a solid black colour. And I'm not worried about going over the edges of the kitten either. That's kind of what I want, because when I come to add the colours of the kitten on top, they will sit out over the background. All of those little hairy edges that we're going to create, they need a bit of background to sit on top of. We've got to see that background colour shining through all of those little fine edges. So the next colour that I'll pick up, or the first colour in fact, if we're not counting black, is a bit of my dark purple from the animal set. So everything from the animal set. So we've got really dark shadow just down this edge of the kitten. So I don't want to completely lose the black that's in there. And then I just want to give a little hint of the curve at the back of the tunnel using this purple. And then I'm happy enough to let this sort of gradually turn into the jet black here. So the little tunnel itself, if you notice, has quite a fur-like texture to it. So it's really not unlike when I'm painting an animal, this kind of thing. I've painted a few cat scratchers before, and they're really, it's best to just treat it like you're painting another animal. Look at the texture on it. Sometimes if I'm painting an animal on a very soft, fuzzy blanket, it's like the blanket is an extension of the animal, because I treat it really like when I'm painting fur. And I think rather than including the little edge of the towel, I think it was just underneath the tunnel, I might make that a more plain colour just underneath. So we've only got this one little corner over here where it's showing. So I think I'll make this front edge just a lighter, more neutral colour perhaps. So align the dark shadow that's underneath the edge of the tunnel here. And this is my light lilac additional colour from the animal set. And you'll see, as always, that I'm coming in with my fingertips. You can see how dirty my fingers get already, and we've only started. But I do normally start with the darker colours, so my fingertips and my hands in general are usually a complete mess, because I like to use my hands and my fingertips to do a lot of the blending. So yeah, just allowing the edge of this shadow to be pretty dark. It's really dark in underneath the little tunnel where the light is not reaching. So it always seems like I'm going really dark to begin with. My first layers of pastel usually look like I've gone too dark, but that's usually what I'm after. I'm usually wanting to create the contrast that I need in my early layers, because it's that contrast that's going to make this look realistic later on. Without those darks going in first, it can end up looking a bit flat. So you want to be brave in your earlier layers, whether that's with darker colours, or sometimes in some of my paintings I'll really go quite vibrant in the early layers, because everything that you put down in these first layers, you got to bear in mind that it's going to get toned down as you work on. So it's not going to stay looking this dark once you start bringing in the mid-tones and your highlights. So just a little glimmer of light at the bottom here. And then for the rest of the tunnel, we're really going to focus on the darkness. So there is no light at the end of this little tunnel. We're going to make it all nice and dark and rich, and hopefully really set off the beautiful, vibrant, warm colours of the little kitten coming out of it. So that's the plan anyway. So I'm just going to make that black a little bit more solid. And keep it all pretty dark up around here. But you can see on the tunnel itself that we do have quite a lot of light hitting it as well. So I'm going to go lighter in colours now. And Grey 8 from the animal set I think is going to be a very good colour for the little tunnel. So we've got the edge of the tunnel coming around. You can just see the curve of it coming around that top corner. And then we've got some light catching all around this edge of the circle. So again, I'm thinking of this a little bit like fur. It does look a little bit like fur, or like wool. And I just love the variety of marks that you get from the soft pastel sticks. You can see that I've no need to try and create detail at this stage. Using the broad end of the pastel stick getting quite chunky marks. And you can really see the texture of the tunnel here. I love how it comes underneath this paw and just across the front edge of this paw. So I'll probably come back and do a little bit more around this front rim when I get the kitten done. But I can certainly get most of the background work done here. So I'm leaving some gaps through the grey 8 here, as you can see, letting those darker colours shine through as well. So it's just like how I work the fur itself. Darker colours down first, then really using those darker colours to shine through my next layers. And then we've got a little bit of light inside the tunnel here as well. So we've got this front edge, we can see the rest of the circular edge just coming up around the top corner here. And then we've got the dark shadow of the kitten. So the kitten is actually casting quite a dark shadow here. But then we've got this section of light where we can see inside the tunnel just a little bit. And I want to just avoid putting any of this grey 8 down into that darker shadow. So you really got to identify where your shadow areas are and then avoid those areas with your lighter values. Sometimes it involves being quite strict with yourself because there is this temptation to go lighter and lighter, and sometimes you've got to really be strict with yourself, not let any of your warm or light values creep into your shadow areas, because you're just going to lose that light and shade immediately and you'll be left with something that starts to look more flat. So after I add the marks in, I'm taking my fingertip, and at this stage I'm happy enough to lose some of that definition. So I don't want my marks to be as visible. I really want to soften that all down a little bit. So I'm not concerned about losing my marks. In these earlier layers, that's kind of what I want. I really want to add the marks in and then knock them back, knock away the definition again. And that's how I build up the layers. So another colour that I'm going to add some of throughout this background is some browns. Now it seems maybe a strange choice that I would bring in browns on something that is a blue-grey colour. We can see the colour that this is, but that doesn't always direct my colour choices entirely, because you've also got other colours around this, and in this case we've got the little orange coloured kitten inside, and that's got to have an effect on the surroundings in the same way that the surroundings will have some effect on the kitten when it comes to paint her, or him in fact. So I'm always looking at how the colour of everything affects the colour of the other objects around, because just knowing that something is blue, for example, does not necessarily mean that it's only blues that you'll use to paint it. It's quite likely that you're going to get some reflected colours or some shadow tones. So I'm dotting some brown. This is BE36. Dotting some of this through the fuzzy stuff. So trying to see other colours is what can really add some 3D dimension to your paintings. Helps things just not look so flat. So not adding too much pigment onto the paper in one go. I'm really taking my time. Quite thin layers, or in some cases like this, just dotting the colour in. So don't rush through these early layers. It's tempting to get past this stage as quickly as possible and to see it start to take shape as quickly as possible. And I think sometimes the desire to get beyond these awkward first stages means that we don't maybe put enough time or effort into these lower layers. We start coming in with highlight colours, and usually it's going too light too soon. So I really want to always spend time on these lower layers and create the contrast that I'm looking for, or the vibrance in the lower layers that I'm looking for. So I'm bringing in a little bit of this warmer brown earth. It's like a plum purple kind of colour. This is BE23. And this is all before coming back in with some highlights again. Just getting some of this colour that can shine through my lighter layers is really important. Perhaps just a little bit of warmth coming down this outer rim. And at any point I can come back in with the black again. using it to kind of create some texture in the darkest areas. And just really looking at how the light and shade is falling on the shape of this. So I really could spend ages on this outer part of the tunnel. You could go into a huge amount of detail, paint every single little piece of fluff that's on it, but that's not my aim today. I'm hoping that I can capture it reasonably quickly, not make a big job out of this background, but hopefully it's going to enhance the painting, that it makes it worth this extra bit of effort. Now, of course, if you're working along, you can absolutely decide to ignore this background and just go for the little kitten. You could put him on a very plain background, as I was planning to. So I'm searching on the pastel sticks for quite a flat edge. I'm not looking for a tiny mark from my pastel stick. This is where you can really use the size of the sticks to get nice interesting marks. And then just softening most of that in a little with my fingertip. So one of the reasons that I really like pastel matte paper at the minute is just for how many layers it can take. So you can come back over this again and again, especially if you keep using pretty thin layers of pastel. You can layer up a lot of colours. You can really manipulate the pastel pigment when it's on the paper, so by blending, or as you'll see later when I'm actually trying to create some detail, how you can manipulate the pastel on the paper to do that. It's quite a versatile paper, and it allows you to do quite a lot of different things that you might want to do when you're working with soft pastel. Now, if you've watched many of my videos, you'll know that I do use some other papers too. For example, Animal Velour. I really like this paper too. Got a very different, soft, fuzzy texture to it, which is actually great for painting animals and things like this. But today I went with the Pastel Matte, well, just because I was in the mood for it. I'm really enjoying Pastel Matte at the minute. And I also really like this lovely warm, rich yellow colour that the Pastel Matte comes in. And I chose this colour based on the little kitten. So you can see how that's quite a good base for the colours that we're going to find on the kitten himself. So I'm coming back in now with the Grey 8 again. And I'm just using that now to create some of that upper texture again. Only now we've got lots of colours to shine through. So when you're trying to create the effect of something that is quite thick and multi-layered, it makes sense that you're going to need multiple layers of pastel to make it look convincing. So that's why I'm not in a hurry to get to my highlight colours, because I want to have lots of steps in between, not just my darkest values and then bang, straight in with the highlight colours. I'm really trying to work my way up to the highlights gradually, and therefore hopefully have lots of layers of colour and interest. So it starts to take a bit more shape now that I've got a few layers of colour down. And as I said, I'm not going to go crazy into crazy amounts of detail for this. I just wanted to create a sense of the scene. And then my hope is always that the detail in the main subject really finishes off all of the detail in the background. So sometimes I have to paint a very, very detailed background. Other times you can get away with so much less, because I know that the detail in the main subject, sometimes that actually tricks your eye into thinking that the whole painting is detailed. So I won't do too much more to this. I'll make a start on the kitten. What I normally do is get the background to a point where I think it starts to look okay. And then if I feel like it, I can move on to the main subject, because I can always come back and add a bit more detail or whatever on the background. The important thing for me is that I've got the colours all blocked in around the edges of the kitten, and all of my little fine hairs will be able to sit out over the background. So if I've still got a few minor adjustments to do on the background towards the end, well, it's usually easier for me to see what needs done when I've got the rest of the painting finished. Because for me, obviously the most important part of this painting is the little kitten. And that's often the case when I'm creating a pet portrait. I'm not usually commissioned to paint background elements. Those aren't usually the thing that's the reason for the painting. They are hopefully just there to enhance the main subject. And I've got a big kitten stalking me at the moment. It's clearly close to feeding time here. I think I'll be having to take a little break soon and go and feed some animals, because once the kitten starts prowling, there's little peace for painting. So I've got my girl Morag walking around the studio at the moment. You can see a time lapse of Morag here on my YouTube, and there's a full-length tutorial of her. She's such a pretty tricolour cat. Very unusual patterns and colours, and I've got a full-length tutorial of her over on my Patreon, but you can check her out here on YouTube as well. And then here on YouTube, one of my other full-length demos here is of my other lovely cat Mocha, and he's a beautiful tabby cat, and I've seen many other artists paint Mocha from my tutorial here on YouTube. So if you have fun with this one, there is lots more on my YouTube channel as well for you to get stuck into. So it's been a year of painting cats actually. All throughout my career as a portrait artist, I have to say I've probably painted less cats. A lot of dog portrait commissions over the years. I seemed to get a reputation as the dog lady, one that I'm very happy to have. I will happily take that reputation. And I just love painting animals in general, but I definitely always got more commissions for dog portraits. So I've really taken this year to paint a lot of cats and make tutorials, choose a nice variety of different colours of cats, because they're all so different, all the beautiful colours that they come in. So I've had a great year of painting cats. And as you saw on my easel just before I started this, I'm right in the middle of a big lioness painting as well. So the cats this year haven't just been domestic ones. I've been painting black leopards, lions, all sorts of cats, big and small. So yeah, I don't think I'll do too much more to this. I think it's close enough pretty soon, I think, that I can start working on the kitten and see how that looks. And then, as I said, I can come back and add a bit more detail in the background elements if I want. But it may be enough. Sometimes it's hard to tell while you don't have the main subject painted. Sometimes you just need to break away from the background and make a start on the main subject. So that's what I'm going to do pretty soon. So just like when I brought in a little bit of brown, I'm just experimenting with a little bit of A27. Just to try and bring in a bit more of that 3D feel. And that really comes from your colour choices. So if there's something that you struggle with, choosing colours, my advice is to just really try and be braver with your colours, really force yourself to pick up colours that you wouldn't normally go for. Because sometimes you just get stuck in a rut with your colour choices. And sometimes it's really interesting to follow another artist and use their colour choices. Because quite often another artist will pick up a colour that you just wouldn't have thought of yourself. And sometimes it just takes doing it that once to open your eyes to the possibilities of colour. And that's what I hope most of all that people get from my tutorials, the extra bit of guidance that gives you the confidence to go for some different colours and to experiment more. Because colour theory, it's something that you can learn. You're not necessarily just born able to see colour really well, and of course some people are, they just have a real natural affinity with colour, but that wasn't me, definitely not. In my earlier days of painting, I was really quite boring with my use of colour. If the thing was brown, I used shades of brown and nothing else, and yeah, it took me a long time to learn a little bit, not just learn about colour theory, because I knew about colour theory, I just didn't understand its relevance, and I didn't understand how you apply that to your own work. And so if you haven't already seen any of them, I have made some videos here for YouTube with that in mind, really coming at it from the point of view of someone who did not understand colour theory and how on earth I could apply that in my own painting. And so I tried to make that colour theory series that I've got here on YouTube. I really tried to make that with myself in mind, like what would have helped me when I was at that stage. What information would have been helpful to me? What would have made it click? And that's the approach I've taken with those videos, to really try and not just explain colour theory, because there's lots of information out there that do that. You can get lots of explanations of colour theory, but I already knew that information and I still couldn't use colour theory properly. So yeah, I really tried to make that series of videos with that in mind, more of how to apply the knowledge rather than just telling you the knowledge. So I think we're pretty close with this. I'm gonna crack on with the kitten now. I'm just adding a little bit of my additional lilac colour here. That's about as light as I'll go for the highlights in the background. I really want the background to be quite dark, and for the bright colours to come from the kitten. So a very sparing amount of highlights just around the front edge a little bit. And I think that will possibly do. So I can adjust this again towards the end if I feel it needs some more. I'm not quite happy with this shadow area inside, but again, I think that's something that might be helped when I get the kitten in and I can see how that light and shade is actually working. So let's stop the background and make a start on the kitty. So I've zoomed us in just a little bit as I start to work on the little face. First thing I'm gonna do is work on the ears. So with a little bit of BE23, I'm just gonna mark in the darker shapes that I can see inside the ears first. I like to work the ears first usually because they're normally at the top of the painting. They're normally sticking out into the background, and ears are something that I tend to spend a bit of time on because they've got those lovely little furry edges all the way around, and the edges of things are usually an area that I can spend quite a bit of time on. So it helps me to get the ears done first, as I've got all the rest of the kitten to lean my hand on if I need to. But it just helps me to get going with the ears first usually. And within my Unison animal set, I've got some lovely fleshy coloured tones like this, with a little bit of pink involved inside the ears usually, so eyes and around the edges of eyes sometimes, inside ears, little noses. There are many places where you might find use for a little bit of pink or purple. So this is a piece of A27 now. So I'm really looking at which edges of the ear are very bright, because we've got a lovely bright edge of the ear coming down this side and coming down this side here. So remember, the light's coming from the left. We're most likely to get some of the brightest edges on the left side of everything. So you're thinking overall on the kitten, so generally the light coming from the left is going to make the left side a bit lighter. But you're looking at the ears, the paws, all parts of the kitten with that same rule in mind because of the direction of the light. So really when I'm painting, I would say that I'm a real slave to the lighting. I'm painting the light sometimes more than I'm painting whatever the subject matter is. The light really could be hitting anything, and I would be going through the same thought process. But again, I'm coming in with whatever I can see as the darker tones to begin with. So ignore those lighter colours to get started. Get those darker tones blocked in first. Just a little dark inner rim on the ear here, and I'm using BE36 for that. And then over on this side, I'm even going to darken this inside ear with a little bit of the BE36 as well, because we've got these lovely little light hairs inside the ear. And if we want those light hairs to show up, well, we got to give them a dark background to show up against. So don't be afraid to go dark in the lower layers. That's always my advice. You can lighten it with your next layers of colour. It's not a problem. like I said, we've got a little light edge here. And across on the other side too, so this is my lightest BE colour in the set. Quite a pale orange kind of brown earth. And that's going to be a colour that features a good bit in the fur of this tiny kitten. So a lot of the work done with my soft pastel sticks, but you will also see pretty soon that I will start to pick up some pastel pencil too. But as much as possible I try to get the main bulk of the blocking in done. You get such a strength of colour from the soft pastel sticks, and I really try to use them for the majority of the colour pigment that I put down. And of course he's a little ginger, so we're going to have some deep gingery colours in here as well. Lots of brown earth colours to choose from in the set. So just looking for the top edge of the little head here. Just join that little gap across the top of the head between the ears. And all the time I'm coming back in with my fingertips, really softening the pigment into the paper. In fact, I really want to lose some of the definition of my marks. I want this to appear soft and fluffy, and if I leave my marks sitting on the paper how they look when I apply them, they always look a little bit too jagged, and you'll see that as I progress. So by softening the marks, yes, I'm losing definition, but that's usually what I want. Just to lose some of the jagged look of my marks. So inside the ear, we're not quite finished. I'm just going to add a little bit of the grey 8. And of course, we've just used a lot of that colour in the background. And it's always good to bring in your background colours wherever you can. Try to use them again in your main subject. That's one of the best tips I can give you. You're going to instantly create colour harmony when you do that. And colour harmony just means that your colours all work together in the painting. Everything's complementary and harmonious, I suppose. And the best way to do that is to reuse colours. So it's always my aim my objective usually, to see just where else I can pick up a colour within a painting. Can I pick it up again? If I've used it in the background, then it is my aim to try and use it in the main subject too. And it makes such a difference. Instant colour harmony. Now, it's not the only thing that will create colour harmony in a painting, but it certainly helps. So a little bit of A33 here, just looking for the structure of the inner ear. Got a bit of light hitting here, just down some of the little rims of flesh inside the ear. And on this scale, well, I've deliberately kept it quite small, which in some ways is tricky with soft pastel because, as you can see, it's quite a blunt looking medium. But when I work small, I find it easier to let go of the idea of painting absolutely every hair, of getting really, really detailed. Sometimes it helps me to paint small just to speed up a little and let go of the need to paint absolutely every hair and every detail. And I love painting details. There's nothing wrong with painting details, but it's a really good exercise to try and speed up a little bit. Look for a way to capture an effect without having to paint absolutely every hair. Can you get the effect, the 3D convincing effect, without going down the very laborious path of painting every single hair? But one place that I do quite like to paint the details and to add little individual hairs will always be around the edges, those very important edges. So I'm just going to pick out this very bright edge of the ear here, and it comes right up to the tip of the ear. And the same on the other side as well. We've got a little bright edge coming around this part of the ear. And for this I'm using, it's a Caran d'Ache, and it's not pure white, it's called pink white or blanc rose, and it's a very subtle light tint. Very useful colour that I've recently actually added to my palette. So just to pick out that bright edge of the ear. And then of course I can also make use of pastel pencil coming from the other side of whatever I'm trying to add detail to, so I can work the edges of things from the background colour. So I can use this dark colour here to help me really shape the edge of the ear, and I'm just dragging the background in again in between the little individual hairs. And that just helps me shape the ear a little better. So a good idea to have a nice dark background for this kitten, I think, because we've got such lovely little glowing edges, and I think they're going to stand out really nicely against the darkness of the background. So this is A19. Just a little light edge on this ear. And you can see I can use the bigger sticks to create tiny little marks as well. I'm just taking my time doing that. So I don't need to use pastel pencil for every bit of detail that I want to add. It's not necessary. I can get it detailed enough with the big sticks. And if you're just starting out with soft pastel, you might find that that seems a bit frustrating to try and get the smaller details with these bigger chunky sticks. And it's really just something that comes with time. You get used to aiming where the pastel is going to make contact on the paper, and it's definitely something that becomes easier the more you use those pastel sticks. But a lot of the time I just don't want quite as much detail as I would get with the pastel pencil, because you get a very sharp point on the pastel pencil, and that's great sometimes, but I find it really difficult to create an entire painting using those tiny little points. I really want the breadth of the marks that I get from the soft pastel sticks as well. So I am picking up some pure white now. This is a General's white. It's called Pastel Chalk 4414 white, and this is my favourite white pencil by far. And I'm just going to drag little hairs now inside the ear, and you can see that they show up really nicely against the dark background colour inside the ear. So it's almost as if the light is reaching the bottom part of this ear, but the actual tip of the ear itself is back inside the darkness of the tunnel, so the whole ear isn't quite in the light. You can see where the light just stops as we come up towards the top of the ear here. think that's why the hairs on this ear are actually quite muted looking. Can't really see them too well because they're just peeping back into the shadows a little bit. So little ears can take a while sometimes. Quite fiddly. Lots of little edges usually sticking up into the background. I always find that once I get beyond the ears, things start to move a lot quicker. But they're also usually quite a key part of any portrait because they really show the animal sitting against the background. So whatever the background colours are, the ears can be the first thing that really brings you down into the animal. So just working that top edge of the ear. This is BE21. And again, background colour, in this case black, can be used to really help shape the ear. So on this scale there's only so much I can do really in terms of detail, and sometimes that's why I like to work small, because it just forces you to stop at a certain point and move on, where you might be tempted to paint absolutely every little detail that you can see. Well, the scale like this forces me to make a decision to just move on. And as you move on throughout the rest of the painting, you hope that the detail that you have added in these areas becomes enough. Just bringing a little bit more of the blue colour inside the ear, and then drag a few of those hairs back out over the top. So between my pure white and this pink white colour, those two colours will be really good for all of the brightest little hairs, I think. So I'm pretty pleased with how the ears look now. At least they're really popping out from the dark background, which is what I hoped. So now that I've got the ears pretty well worked, I'm going to start and block in some of the colours on the rest of the kitten. So I'm looking for the darks first, and that brings me over to the right side of the face. You can see just how much darker it is on the right side where the light isn't reaching. So this is NE1. So it's like a really dark orange. And then in around here we could go even darker in here. It's particularly dark down this side of the kitten. So picking up a darker brown from the animal set. It's actually quite hard to see in the photo reference where this little shoulder ends, because it's quite similar in tonal value to the dark background here. So in order to make this look 3D, I've got to go really dark where I need that contrast. And around the bottom of the chin we've got shadow there. And although this is a little bit too dark, we've got a slight shadow just showing the edge of the face coming around here. So I can continue with this dark brown and just block in a few of the very darkest areas quickly. Because this is quite a small little kitten, I can do a lot of the blocking in with my dark colours right across the body if I want, or sometimes I really like to work the face first. It's usually a good idea to not put too much pigment where you might want to lean your hand, for example. So the little markings on the face, some of those are a bit darker too. So again, that looks really dark, but it will tone down, of course, when I come in around that with the lighter colours. And perhaps just switch back to the NE1 colour for the markings on this side of the face. I'm just looking for the shapes of the markings. And I don't have to be particularly neat at this stage. It's really my upper layers where I'm going to try to give the effect of the texture of the fur and the direction of the fur. But you can see that even already when I'm making my marks, I'm thinking about the general direction of the fur and trying to make my marks in that same direction. And you'll notice if you paint many animals that they tend to follow a similar pattern. So you've got the hairs coming up the forehead, then coming around the shape of the eyes, coming out the cheeks in both directions. So these are things that you start to notice when you've painted a few animals. They do follow similar sort of patterns. And it's really that pattern that you're trying to create in the fur
that will give us a sense of the structure and the 3D form of the animal. So down this side of the nose, I'm really just looking for all the spots where I can see some of these darker brown colours. And then I'm smudging that all over the place. I'm not being particularly neat about it. And then we've got the little whiskers, or the little holes for the whiskers. And sometimes I just plot those in with a straight line to give me the general direction that the holes go in. So let's see if we can get some of the lighter orange tones now blocked in around that. See if that starts to give us some sense of the form. So a lighter orange toned brown earth. It's BE11. And now I can kind of come in around my darker marks and start to shape the little markings on the face using my lighter colours. And now as we come over this side of the face, the colours get a bit more muted because we're coming over into the shadows. But I am going to lay down a little bit of this BE11 anyway, and then I can tone it down with some other colours later on. But this BE11 makes a pretty good base for the majority of the lighter parts of the ginger fur. So I like to get a bit of the face, the structure of the face and the fur going before I tackle anything like the detail in the eyes. I usually like to get some sense of the overall structure going first. So that's why I don't tend to come in and do the eyes right away. Although, of course, you can. It's no big deal what order you do things in, really. You're going to reach a similar end product either way. But this is just the way I like to do it. I really like to get some of the structure built up, and it helps me to make sure that I've got the eyes placed correctly, because if you come in and do the eyes first, well, if you've got them slightly off in your initial sketch, then it's very hard to move them later on. So I like to try and be sure of everything else on the face before I commit to adding the eyes. So to tone down this side of the fur, I'm going to bring in some A27. I think this should be dark enough just to tone down the orangeness of this fur on this side, because as we come around into the shadows, really it gets a bit more muted. We don't get quite the same warmth from the ginger. and maybe just go a little bit darker. I'm just looking at the difference in the colour of the fur here in comparison to the inner ear just beside it. So I'm using other parts of the cat now to compare my tonal values. Do I need this part to be darker or lighter in comparison to what's sitting next to it? And really I want to get a bit of the work done with these oranges and browns before I come in with any of the little white markings, because as you'll see shortly, once I come in with the white markings on the face, it should really start to come to life, hopefully. So concentrating on the darker colours first. Getting some of these lovely little markings in on the forehead. So perhaps now I can come in with a little bit of lighter colour throughout this side of the face especially. I've got my lightest brown earth here. So the animal set has a really good range of brown earths, and of course browns are very useful for painting most animals. And I tried to include in that set a good selection of different types of brown earth that you might encounter on animals. So I'm just going to lighten this side of the ginger. And again, I'm still smudging everything with my fingertip because, well, the kitten is unbelievably soft looking, so I want my marks to look really soft. And to do that, you've got to blend a little bit. You really can't leave your marks sitting as they are applied on the paper. You really got to do this bit of blending in between to get that softness. And especially in the lower layers, you don't have to worry too much about getting, you know, every single little hair. You really don't have to replicate every single hair to make something look convincingly furry. Sometimes actually it's better to not paint every single hair, if that makes sense. Sometimes it's more the little clumps of fur that you're trying to paint rather than each individual hair. So I'm just starting to look for the pattern on the kitten's face. And of course I'm keeping most of this lighter colour over to the left side of the face here, where we've got the main light source coming. So you can still see patches of the yellow paper shining through. I haven't even filled the paper yet. I'm adding everything in quite thin layers, so I'm not adding big thick chunks of pigment on at a time. Everything's in quite thin layers, so I'm building it up gradually. And I think I can afford to go just a bit darker over here as well. It's a really dark bit of shadow around this side of the face. And I definitely want to capture that because he's really looming out of the darkness on this side, so it makes sense that this side of his little face would be really dark. And I'm even going to bring in some black under the chin here, because it just almost, the little body just almost melts into the darkness here. So I'll pick up some BE21 and just going to add a few little subtle highlights throughout the fur here, especially up at the top. Now BE21 and A27 are good colours to bring in because you can see that the kitten isn't really bright ginger. It's not a really vivid ginger. It's slightly more muted, almost more of a blonde colour in places. So this BE21 can help to tone down some parts of the ginger. But the fun part is coming up soon, because I'm going to add some of the white markings on the face very soon, and that's really going to, well, to start and make it seem 3D, hopefully.